While Heinrich was watching his life dissolve into worthless paper, a farmer 30 kilometers outside Berlin was thriving. Not because he had gold, not because he had foreign currency, because he had something far more immediate, far more powerful. He had rye, butter, and potatoes. He had things that could not be printed. And the people who came to see him every day brought him, instead of worthless marks, real goods in exchange. They brought shoes, they brought coats, they brought tools. One man brought a Leica camera, one of the finest cameras in the world, and exchanged it for enough flour to last 4 months. The items that held value in that crisis were not what most people expected. And this pattern, the same pattern, has repeated itself in 6 different countries across 100 years of economic history.
So, are you prepared if the economy collapses? What do you have in your wallet? Is it what you have in your wallet that counts? Or what you can exchange in barter systems? That's what you go to when the economy collapses. So be prepared and see us tonight at 7 o'clock for another episode of the Short Bus Podcast TV in learning what we're all about.
While Heinrich was watching,
most drama queens are looking for the mic on the main stage of the abyss. They don't want meaning, just a spotlight in a popularity contest where the uglier the drama, the bigger the score. Validation is a cheap token, and the price is your weakened soul. They share their drama in the public square, hoping it will fill the emptiness of the void. It's not about finding themselves, it's about becoming a trending topic for the audience. They confuse attention for affirmation. That's the most pathetic tightrope act of all. Using fake smiles for likes, and the joke is, the more you cry, the louder the applause. You're all just waiting for my bus, the one with one seat, to take you one way to nowhere. Enjoy the ride!
Greetings, everybody. Keith here. Hoping everybody's having a good day, enjoying life, living life, loving life. We want to remind everybody, hit the like, share, and subscribe button, and there is a PayPal link down below for anybody who wants to share some love. All is appreciated. Trying to get the StreamYard back up for the Short Bus Podcast TV for full panel debates on what really should matter in the coming days. So let's take a look at what we've got tonight. 5 barter items. I guess I should edit that title. I missed the R on there. 5 barter items you need when the economy collapses. And this is stuff that you can start doing now to prepare. And even if the economy doesn't collapse, you can help strengthen it by becoming less dependent upon it. We're going to talk about this money system and how it enslaves people into the comfort and convenience, particularly through technologies and modernization. So we're going to take a look. Let me drop this one here. I have to pull up a different screen share. So please bear with me. Be up, double check, and we've got it. Okay. Excuse me. So as we get started, there's 5 items in the video that we're going to review, but I'm going to give you a list of 10 items that go along with it in these modern times that we really need to be concerned about. So it's not just the 5 basics that have shown themselves in the most ancient times or whatever, but more in the modern times as we see these wars and everything collapsing economies around the world. It's happening more and more, and you never know if it might hit the homeland. So let's take a look. We've got water purification systems, water purification supplies. Clean water is the most urgent need. Portable filters like life straws, purification tablets, and liquid bleach are high value because they're lightweight and life-saving. Heirloom seeds. In a long-term collapse, the ability to grow food becomes the ultimate currency. Non-hybrid, or in other words, heirloom seeds, are preferred because they allow for seed harvesting for the next season. We have the need to comprehend that GMOs and such are doing, comprehend what GMOs and such are doing to the food supply. How long has it been since you have had an orange with seeds that was juicy and tart and sweet? Hygiene products, soap, toothpaste, and feminine hygiene products are often overlooked but critical for preventing disease and maintaining morale, that sense of self-worth, self-appreciation, the need to look and be present in a desirable manner. Baking soda is the gold standard, but you can use finely crushed eggshells or calcium carbonate from limestone and bind it with coconut oil or bentonite clay and hardwood charcoal, and you have a very simple, natural toothpaste. Raw cotton, wadded and bound by thread, can be used to absorb monthly flow for women. Simple and natural. Back to the very basics. Some of those very basics are the lighters and matches. The ability to start a fire for warmth or cooking is foundational. Bulk packs of disposable lighters are far more practical for bartering than expensive magnesium strikers. Ferro rods are the last line before rubbing two sticks together. So you have matches and lighters, then you have the magnesium strikers, which are your ferro rods, and then you have rubbing two sticks together. So there are different levels of being able to do things to get the warmth or cooking heat, right? But whether you use matches, ferro rods, or a lighter, and today we have butane jet fuel lighters or even electronic lighters. Ammunition. Ammunition is one of the most valuable of all metals. Common calibers act as a gold standard in many collapse scenarios. They serve both protection and hunting, making them highly liquid assets in a trade economy. The multi-purpose materials are where one can diversify when time comes. Spirits and fuels are the same and also work for antiseptic when it comes to medicines. Precious metals, and when we're talking about precious metals, we're talking about the small denomination coins. While gold and silver are traditional hedges, small silver coins, even your copper pennies, often called junk silver, are more practical for daily transactions, like buying a loaf of bread than a large gold bar. So while economies change, you can still use the leftover monetary means. Paper itself, not worth much, but those small coins that have some kind of actual substance and also are multi-purpose, like nickels and copper pennies stuck in the soil beside your plants, operate as a hedge for your plants for better growth. So multi-purpose in the metals themselves, the coins and stuff have multiple metals and act as those anodes and cathodes when they come in contact with those soils. Very minute, but yet can make so much better. And this goes for your daily work in gardening and the result of having a better harvest in rough times. Batteries and solar chargers. This is a more modern thing. As the grid fails, people have become comfortable and convenient for the provision of the grid and depend on a lot more than their nature. And so when those things fail, they'll be driven back to do what is in their nature. And if they don't know how, they're going to have a hard time surviving. This is why it's important that we discuss these things now And even if it doesn't come to a collapse, still get out there and practice it and make it part of your repertoire of education so you can pass that down to your children. Or people move more to off-grid lifestyles, the demand for portable power spikes. The demand for the portable power spikes. Rechargeable batteries paired with small foldable solar panels are high utility trade items. Fishing gear and snares. This is for the transition as well as the desperate times of survival. You can alleviate a lot of your expenses right now by transitioning to acquire passive calories that are extremely valuable without spending money in the way you do. A lot of this stuff you can even find along the banks. People have been doing it for so long. You can find the wire and the fishing line and use branches and stuff and still gather the small fish along the banks. Hooks, high-test line, and wire for snares are small, light, and easy to trade. And we'll be reviewing some survival videos along the way too, so be watching for those. I'll show my own skills here and there, just like the gardening stuff. Be doing some videos on some of my gardening stuff. Hopefully get that in here this next couple of weeks or so. Tarps and duct tape. These are universal repair items. Along with super glues, greases, oils, and other sealants, they can be used for everything from patching a roof to creating a makeshift shelter or waterproofing gear. Information and skills. This is one that we're working on now in this platform. We're trying to build people's information and their skills by getting them active in this stuff. We want you people to be active and start practicing this stuff on your own. So in that, good evening, Captain Action. In that, the physical books on first aid, edible plants, or engine repair are invaluable. Likewise, the ability to perform a service like blacksmithing or sewing is a renewable barter item. And again, these are the things that we talk about in teaching our children our own trade. It's a renewable barter item if you renew yourself in that procreation, co-creation, and creating your own offspring. Understand how important the education is. To teach a man to fish, you teach him how to fish for a lifetime for himself. That's the best barter item there is, information and skills. Today, we even have mobile devices, which eliminates the actual need for physical books. Stock your library up to date, but never destroy or get rid of the physical books. So today, we can use these mobile devices and libraries, and I suggest you stock them up with the good PDFs on what you want to do when it comes to this kind of stuff. What will your specialty be? What will your talents be? Will it be in the gardening? Will it be in the hunting and gathering? Will they be in the production of milk and cheeses and stuff like that? Will they be in caretaking of the stock? You know, herding tendering and herding your stock. Stock your library up to date, but never destroy or get rid of the physical books. Don't let this electronic database be the book burning of modern times. If you have the information and skills to turn wood ash and animal fat into soap, you have a renewable currency. People will always trade food or fuel for the ability to stay clean and prevent infection. Learning what one has in the immediate area and using these devices to learn what those resources can produce, one can then make their own currency from them, from those resources. So think about this stuff, folks. This is what we're talking about as a real education to prepare you and preserve your posterity. So let's pull up the next one. The video I want to go over here, there's two of them. I've got the Frugal Off Grid guy, and I've got this one here.
Imagine it is the 15th.
Give me a second here, folks. For some reason, my computer is lagging again. It keeps reverting me back to that screen. I don't know why. Anyway, while we're at a quick break, hit the like, share, and subscribe button. There's a PayPal link down there for anybody who wants to share some love. And let's get into it. This is from Economic Signal. Economic Signal. And they're going to talk about 5 barter items that become more valuable than gold.
Imagine it is the 15th of November, 1923. You are a 44-year-old university professor living in Berlin, Germany. Your name is Heinrich. You have spent 20 years building a respectable life. You have a modest apartment near the Tiergarten, a good coat, and a shelf of well-worn books. You have a savings account that just 3 years ago was enough to retire on. You wake every morning at 7, dress carefully, and walk to the university. There you teach literature to students who still believe the world makes sense. You have a wife named Elsa and a daughter named Clara, who is 9. You grow your own small supply of potatoes in a window box because the grocery stores have become a kind of theater of the absurd. The stores are full of prices that change between the morning and the afternoon. Yesterday, a loaf of bread cost 80 billion marks. Today, it costs 200 billion. You check your wallet, you have 300 billion marks. In theory, you are a billionaire.
In theory, you are a billionaire. This is Heinrich. And in 1923, he had billions in the bank and was starving to death. Why? Because paper money became a ghost. In a real collapse, precious metals like junk silver are your only bridge back to reality. That's what I was talking about with the small denominations of coin. And that will be a bridge back to reality. And people that can sustain that part of the system in a barter of exchange and keep those coins around can help rebuild that government that is destroyed by a bad economy. If you can hold it and keep it, you don't own it. Those small denomination coins are still usable in a barter transition upon a collapse. And lead will be a must. And we'll discuss this shortly.
Practice, you cannot afford dinner. Your savings account has been erased, not stolen, not lost, simply erased by the mathematics of hyperinflation, which means prices rise so fast that the value of paper money collapses. It collapses faster than anyone can spend it. The government printed money to pay its debts after World War I. Now each mark you hold is worth less than the paper it is printed on. You have worked your entire adult life for a number on a piece of paper, and the number is now meaningless. But here's the part they never told you in school. Here's the part that almost nobody knows about 1923 Germany. While Heinrich was watching his life dissolve into worthless paper, a farmer 30 kilometers outside Berlin was thriving.
And he was thriving because the city starved. He didn't have gold. He had potatoes and butter. This is the power of the heirloom seeds I was talking about. See, true wealth isn't what's in your wallet. It's what's in the soil. Can you grow your own economy? Can you grow your own currency? This is what we're thinking about when we talk about that survival. Can you do it yourself without the government? Because that's what the government is the economy.
Not because he had gold, not because he had foreign currency, because he had something far more immediate, far more powerful. He had rye, butter, and potatoes. He had things that could not be printed. And the people who came to see him every day brought him, instead of worthless marks, real goods in exchange. They brought shoes, they brought coats, they brought tools. One man brought a Leica camera, one of the finest cameras in the world, and exchanged it for enough flour to last 4 months. The items that held value in that crisis were not what most people expected. And this pattern, the same pattern, has repeated itself in 6 different countries across 100 years of economic history. And every single time, it is the same 5 categories of goods that outperform everything else, including gold. If you have ever wondered why the things people depend on most,
the same 5 categories that we were talking about, the 5 basic categories, food, which includes salts, spices, things like that from herbs and roots, as well as your gardening. Salt is essential for biological health and food preservation, such as curing meat. Spices like black pepper or cinnamon become luxury trade goods when global supply chains stop. Over-the-counter medications Basic health issues can become fatal without intervention. Pain relievers like ibuprofen, aspirin, antihistamines, antidiarrheal meds, and broad-spectrum antibiotics, as well as insulin, are always in high demand in these times. Spirits and alcohol. High-proof alcohol serves a multiple purpose. It's a psychological comfort, recreational, we already know that quite well, and a medical necessity as a disinfectant for wounds and tools, as well as a fuel source for fire or even engines. Hand tools, just like the fishing and hunting equipment, your simple mechanical tools, wrenches, hammers, manual drills, and saws, are all vital for repairs when power tools are no longer an option. And then, of course, you have your normal vices and everything like coffee and tobacco, which history shows maintain their value even in the worst conditions. These are high-value luxury items that people will trade significant resources to obtain.
Most become the most powerful form of wealth. Stay with me. What you're about to hear is not a theory. It is a documented historical pattern. It has happened in Germany, in the Soviet Union, in Argentina, in Zimbabwe, in Venezuela, in Lebanon, and it always reveals the same 5 items, the same mechanism, the same result. And if you find value in this kind of historical clarity, subscribing takes 2 seconds. It keeps you ahead of what most people never see coming. Before we go further, there is something important to understand about why money loses its power in the first place. Because without understanding that mechanism, the 5 items we are about to discuss will seem like coincidences. They are not coincidences. They are cause and effect. Money, anywhere in the world, has value for one reason only, because people believe it does. That is the entire foundation, nothing more. The moment that collective belief begins to crack, the system does not break gradually, it shatters. And when it shatters, human beings do what they have always done across recorded history. They return to the oldest form of exchange on Earth.
They return to the oldest exchange known on Earth. This is the lifeboat principle, and it's simple. You can't drink a gold bar. Water purification supplies and lighters are the hidden kings of trade in this modern world. One spark or one clean gallon is worth more than a diamond when the taps go dry. It actually becomes the breath of life.
Trade goods directly for other goods. They barter. But not all goods are equal in a barter economy. Think of it like this. Imagine you have just survived a shipwreck. You're on a lifeboat with 9 strangers. You have a gold bar. Someone else has a box of waterproof matches and 3 days of clean water. Who has the real wealth? The gold bar is beautiful. It will not corrode. In a functioning economy, it is priceless. But right now, on that lifeboat, it is an expensive rock. It cannot keep you warm. It cannot quench your thirst. It cannot do the one thing that matters, keep you alive. This is the central insight that runs through every barter economy in modern history. The items that acquire extraordinary value during collapse are not items that hold abstract worth. They are items that deliver immediate, irreplaceable utility. Items that people need right now, today, tonight. Items that cannot be substituted. Items that are small enough to carry and divisible enough to make change. They are universal enough that nearly everyone wants them. Gold fails several of these tests during acute crisis. The 5 items we are about to examine pass all of them, and the historical evidence is overwhelming. This brings us directly to the first item on this list. To understand it, we need to travel to a place even more controlled than a city, a place where everything was rationed, yet a fully functioning economy still emerged from almost nothing. We need to go inside a Second World War prisoner of war camp sometime around 1944. A British economist named Richard Radford found himself imprisoned in a German POW camp after being captured. He was not yet famous. He was simply a young man trying to survive behind wire fences.
Excuse me. Okay, this is the POW currency, prisoners of war. And as it'll tell you, when they got their supplies, they were rationed out per prisoner, and they were all the exact same supplies. Some prisoners didn't smoke cigarettes, so they would use the cigarettes as currency to exchange for other items in other people's packs. So inside a 1944 prison camp, cigarettes became money. And this proves that high demand vices like coffee and tobacco are the ultimate trade bait. They are small, portable, and universally wanted. They fill a vacuum when the dollar dies. Today, and outside of the prisons, the nature that surrounds us provides many herbal medicines, teas, spirits, fuels, and root both fruits and flowers as well. This is our currency in our nature.
But he was also trained to observe systems. What he observed would become a famous economics paper. It was published in 1945, simply titled The Economic Organization of a POW Camp. Here is what Radford found. When Red Cross parcels arrived, every prisoner received roughly the same allocation: tins of food, chocolate, a handful of other supplies, and cigarettes. The parcels were equal, but the prisoners were not equal in their desires. Some men wanted food more than cigarettes. Some men wanted cigarettes desperately and barely cared about the tinned cheese. Within days of the first parcel distribution, prisoners began to trade: a tin of salmon for 20 cigarettes, a tin of cheese for 5 cigarettes, a ration of chocolate for 3 cigarettes. Within weeks, without any central authority designing it, cigarettes had become the de facto currency of the camp. This means the accepted medium of exchange: prices denominated in cigarettes, debts settled in cigarettes. Even haircuts performed by prisoners for other prisoners were priced in cigarettes. Radford noted something remarkable. Non-smokers were buying cigarettes not to smoke them, but to use as money. They understood the cigarette was the most liquid, divisible unit of value in their world. You could break a cigarette into pieces to make smaller change. You could store 50 in a pocket. You could hand one to anyone in the camp, and they would understand exactly what it was worth. Why cigarettes and not something else? Why not gold if anyone happened to have it? Why not bread? The answer reveals the mechanism that drives every barter economy in history. Bread is perishable. It loses its value within days. Gold, if anyone had it, cannot be broken into small pieces easily. It cannot be verified without tools. It has no direct consumption value where survival is measured in calories. But a cigarette could calm a man's nerves after months of captivity. It was small, portable, divisible, and universally desired.
Absolutely. A cigarette could calm a man's nerves, but ammunition and fishing gear provide the calories. It's important to keep those kind of things around. And these are consumable wealth units. You don't just trade them, you use them to secure your next meal. That's utility you can't inflate. That is survival without economy. These items are a must in most inventories.
It had intrinsic utility. That means it could actually do something for the person holding it. That is the formula. That is the secret. And this was not limited to POW camps. The cigarette economy did not end when the war ended. After Germany's surrender in May 1945, the official German currency, the Reichsmark, was widely distrusted. It had effectively stopped functioning as a medium of exchange across much of the country. The black market was not a marginal phenomenon. It was the real economy, and cigarettes, especially American cigarettes distributed to Allied soldiers, became the backbone of that economy. By the summer of 1945, a single pack of American cigarettes was worth $90 American in Berlin. By some reports, that same pack later reached $180 in value. One pack. An American GI was holding what amounted to significant wealth in the destroyed economy. 30 packs of cigarettes could buy a Leica camera, a precision instrument worth a small fortune. 7 cartons could buy a working radio. 3 packs could buy a dog. People were not buying these cigarettes to smoke them. They were buying them as a trustworthy store of value. They were more stable than the official currency and more accepted than almost any other good. This lasted from 1945 until the German currency reform of...
And that's a lot like this drama in these panels and stuff these days. It's more accepted than information and knowledge. So that's what we're trying to correct. Getting away from the vices and turning more to a justifiable means and progression towards something better.
June 1948. The Deutschmark was introduced and immediately restored confidence in paper money. The moment a trustworthy currency returned, the cigarette economy collapsed. Because cigarettes were never really about cigarettes. They were about filling a vacuum. They were the water that rushed in to fill the empty space left when official currency drained away. And that principle, the vacuum principle, is at the heart of every item on this list. Here is something I want you to think about before we go further.
That vacuum, when an economy collapses, it causes a vacuum of loss amongst everybody. And that vacuum is where they go and they turn to those substances and stuff for those vices to calm their nerves. It's a spiritual vacuum. It's a spiritual battle.
We just watched cigarettes outperform the official currency of an industrialized nation. Not once, but twice, in a POW camp and then in post-war Germany for the same reason. Now consider this. If you had been Heinrich and understood this mechanism in advance, what would you have done? Drop your answer in the comments. Seriously, what I am about to show you next changes everything. The second item on this list is alcohol.
And this is one of my favorites because it's actually got multiple uses that you would be amazed. I've used it with honey and various different flowers and set them in a small ceramic bowl, mixed it all together, and then put it above a flame, a candle flame, and it works as a great incense. And then when it dries up all the alcohol and you have this sticky, gooey stuff left, it's edible. So now you can use what's left over as a throat lozenge to help soothe a sore throat or something.
Understand why we need to travel to Russia in the winter of 1991. The Soviet Union was in the final stages of collapse. It formally ceased to exist on December 25th, 1991, but the economic collapse had begun well before that date, and it continued for years afterward. When central planning broke down, the ruble became nearly worthless almost overnight. Official wages were still being paid, technically, but the stores were empty. The supply chains that had fed nearly 300 million people had disintegrated. In that vacuum, something happened. People reverted to what they knew, what they had always quietly known worked.
Vodka, the liquor, the spirits, and it was used to calm the nerves. And it wasn't used to calm the nerves simply by consuming it, but because it became an economic exchange. So even possessing it, knowing that somebody else desired it, helped calm some nerves in the people that merely held it and planned on distributing it to others. 1991 Russia, teachers were paid in vodka. All kinds of stories about that. Spirits and alcohol act as a social lubricant as well as medical disinfectants. So it's not just those that consume them for their spiritual calming, but for their medicinal calming, the disinfectants, and being assured that they won't get any worse. It's a healing property. And then pair that with salt and spices to preserve meat, and you're not just surviving, you're one of the most powerful traders in the neighborhood. That's why it's important to understand not to put all your eggs in one basket. Get multi-talented, like the parable of the talents says in the Christian scriptures. You may only have one talent. Go forth with that one talent, come back with two. You've got 3 talents, go forth with those 3 talents, come back with 6. You've got 5 talents, go forth with the 5 talents, come back with 10. All you're doing is the intent here is to invest. Invest in what you know and can do. So some of these spirits are also a source of fuel as well, like I mentioned before. And we'll discuss this more in the next video on diesel fuels.
Vodka. In Russia, vodka had always held a special status beyond its role as a drink. It had been a social lubricant, a medicine of sorts, a reward, and a comfort. Crucially, it was a commodity that nearly every adult in Soviet society wanted and valued. When the ruble became unreliable, vodka stepped in. Not as a metaphor, literally. There are documented cases from the early 1990s of teachers being paid their wages in vodka bottles. They would then resell them or use them for barter. Factory workers were compensated in whatever was produced. A brick factory worker received bricks. A coffin factory worker received coffins. A vodka distillery worker received vodka. Only one was reliably tradable for food. The NPR program Planet Money documented what they called the bricks for rubles phenomenon. Physical goods, including construction bricks, were more reliable as a form of payment than currency. By the mid-1990s, up to 70% of industrial transactions in Russia were conducted through barter. This was not among street traders, but among industrial enterprises. Factories trading coal for steel, power plants trading electricity for parts, entire sectors operating without rubles at all.
That's on an industrial scale, where the corporate entities are bartering trading in order to keep themselves going through a collapse until that new economy is established. See, even they on the large scale, the macro scale, know that it's not likely. And even if it does happen, they have mechanisms of barter and exchange to make it through it. If they can do it on the macro scale, why is it not that people can do this on the micro scale? I don't think it's a matter of they can't. I think it's a matter of most people don't want to. I think most people are dependent upon the monetary system. I think most people are so dependent upon it, they've lost even the care or concern of doing it themselves. They lack the willingness to take upon a responsibility that should be naturally inherent. And that way, when something does collapse, if it does collapse, they're the ones that are struggling to survive.
It was the largest barter economy in the modern industrial.
Again, relative to the parable of the talents. You're not going to invest in your natural talents, then pity on you. I don't know what else to say.
World. And throughout this, vodka held a unique position. It was small enough to carry and universally demanded. It could be stored for years. It could be divided into glasses poured from a bottle. It had an immediate consumption value that no gold coin could match. A man freezing in a Russian winter could not eat a gold coin. He could drink vodka. That difference in crisis is the difference between something theoretical and something real. The alcohol lesson does not end in Russia. In post-war Europe, spirits were treated as a premium currency. In Yugoslavia, during the hyperinflation of 1992 to 1994, the dinar lost value by the billion%. Reports described people crossing borders with cigarettes and bottles of alcohol stuffed into bags.
All that stuff stuffed into bags as they migrate and stuff moving along. Taking it upon themselves, even the transportation of which is, again, if the economy collapses and you don't have a car, you're going to be stuck to what you can carry if you have to be mobile. So the collapse isn't a fire, it's a river changing course. You need tarps and duct tape to patch holes in your life. And these are the universal repair items that keep you dry and keep your gear running when the stores are empty. Many fabrics that are lightweight and quickly formed for wear, warm, or protection of some sort. I recommend also keeping a supply of spider wire or some kind of braided line. That's always good for sewing as well as binding, fishing, all kinds of stuff.
They traded them in foreign markets for goods that had vanished from Yugoslav shelves. The bus rides back home were packed with quiet, exhausted people carrying the only money that worked. The mechanism is always the same. Collapse is not a fire. It is a river changing course. It does not arrive in one catastrophic instant. It flows around established channels slowly, then all at once. When the old path is gone, new pathways form through whatever terrain is available. Alcohol, like cigarettes, flows into those channels because it satisfies a deep and inelastic human demand. Inelastic means people will want it regardless of circumstances. That makes it valuable when rules change. Most people will never know what you now know. They keep trusting systems they do not fully understand. And most people will be surprised when those systems behave unexpectedly. If you are still here watching this, you are not most people. You look at history with clear eyes. Hit subscribe. Because the next section is the part this channel was made for. The part they do not put in textbooks. The part that, once you see it, you cannot unsee. The third item on this list is medicine. The case study here is from 2016 Venezuela. Venezuela once had one of the highest standards of living in South America. The country had been genuinely wealthy on the strength of the world's largest proven oil reserves. But mismanagement and political dysfunction created a perfect storm. The Boulevard C.O.W.A.R.D.S was in freefall. Inflation eventually reached over 1,000,000% annually. Something costing $1 became 10,000. By 2016, basic, essential prescription medications had disappeared from pharmacy shelves. Not reduced, disappeared. Supply chains had broken. The government lacked foreign currency to import. In the vacuum that followed, a black market for medicine emerged, operating in large part through barter. Carlos Gonzalez in Caracas needed to find a heart disease drug for his mother. Without it, his mother's heart was at risk. He searched every pharmacy in the city. Empty shelves.
Empty shelves. But even in Venezuela, 4 rolls of toilet paper bought life-saving heart meds. Hygiene products and over-the-counter medications are non-negotiable. When the pharmacy is empty, the person with the antibiotics and the soap owns the market. In a barter system, this is where information, knowledge, and experience all play their vital role in value. The more one can produce yourself, the more you own your corner of any market. That's your local power.
So he turned to WhatsApp and began posting in community groups, asking if anyone had extra doses. Someone responded. And the deal they struck was not made in Bolivar's. It was made in toilet paper. 4 rolls of toilet paper for a course of a heart medication needed to survive. 4 rolls of toilet paper had become more valuable than the money in Carlos's bank account. The money was worthless for saving his mother's life, but something tangible and useful worked. This was not an isolated incident. Television stations were broadcasting requests for medical supplies. Social media groups operated around the clock, matching people with leftover medication to those in need. Insulin, blood pressure medication, and chemotherapy drugs all.
This is going to be an important aspect if something like this happens during our lifetime. Knowing the medications that our family is on, if one of them passes on, gathering up that medication, because again, that's going to be your gold and silver. So it's going to be a matter of understanding that this stuff, this medication is no longer by prescription, but by value in a barter and exchange. Okay, so it alleviates the long arm of the government in its economy, which includes the requirement for prescriptions and stuff. So when your economies collapse, a lot of those legal things collapse as well.
All moved through informal barter networks. One administrator described this process as a quest. You had to know someone abroad. You had to find a doctor willing to write a prescription and pay in illegal foreign currency. A can of baby formula was trading at 30% of a minimum monthly wage on the black market. And people were paying it because what is the alternative when your child needs to eat? The medical barter economy showed that the most valuable items are necessity goods. When the normal supply system fails.
And that's what I was saying about the medications. The necessity of life-saving medications without a prescription is overbearing the prescription requirement.
Items somebody's life depends on become powerful mediums of exchange. You can negotiate on the price of a television. You cannot negotiate on the price of insulin. Germany, 1945, Russia, 1992, Venezuela, 2016. 3 different countries, same mechanism. Official currency loses function through hyperinflation or supply chain destruction. People do not stop trading. They find a new medium. It is always an item everyone needs that cannot be easily substituted. It must be divisible and have immediate, undeniable value to the person receiving it. The rot, in every one of these cases, was in the beams before it was on the surface. The German Reich.
Absolutely. And I'm telling you, folks, the rot is the simple fact that instead of using a barter and exchange system yourself, everybody's become dependent upon a monetary system. And that's what you're unwilling to give up. You're unwilling to give up a monetary system that belongs to somebody else, and therefore you're in a usufruct and using somebody else's money to sustain values. That's the problem. You've become enslaved to the money instead of investing in your talents. Again, I remind you of the parable of the talents.
Reichsmark and Soviet rubles collapses were years in the making. Venezuela showed warning signs. The people who recognized the rot were those who understood physical goods were safer than paper claims. They were not paranoid. They were simply paying attention to history. The pattern is impossible to ignore. This leads to the 4th and 5th items on this list: food staples and fuel. To examine them, we look at Zimbabwe from 2007 to 2009 and Argentina in 2001. In Zimbabwe, annual inflation reached 89.7 sextillion%. Prices doubled every 24 hours. A loaf of bread requiring trillions of dollars. Government notes were used to light fires. In that environment, food staples like sugar, salt, and flour became the primary medium of exchange, not because they were glamorous, but because they were edible and could be stored. Farmers who had food would not accept Zimbabwe dollars. They accepted other food, tools, or fuel. Fuel, the fourth item on this list, was perhaps the single most fought over commodity. Gasoline, diesel, and generator fuel.
And notice, it was the guy producing food that quit accepting government money because he understood that he was no longer dependent upon that money system. He empowers himself. And this is why I love these little farmers markets and stuff, because I've been there before and I've been able to do the barter exchange openly in their commercial center. This is why Jesus flipped the table, folks. So in Zimbabwe, the person who controlled the fuel controlled everything. Batteries, solar chargers are your personal power plant. When the grid goes dark, portable power is the most electrifying trade asset you can own. We'll also be speaking more about water power generators for small streams and such soon as well, for those homesteaders that aren't mobile and sticking to a plot of land.
In Zimbabwe, the person who controlled fuel controlled everything. Fuel ran generators for hospitals and moved trucks that carried whatever food still existed. When fuel became scarce, it was traded at extraordinary premiums, just like cigarettes in Berlin. People with no access to it, like pensioners or salaried workers, were locked out of the functioning economy. In Argentina, the peso collapsed in 2001. Savings accounts were frozen by banks. The middle class woke up one morning to find they could not access their money at all. What emerged was a network of barter clubs called the Redes de Truque. It exploded in size. By early 2002, these clubs had approximately 2.5 million active members across 5,000 nodes. People traded homemade empanadas for repairs. A doctor offered consultations for vegetables. A teacher gave reading lessons for cooking oil. The clubs issued their own internal credit currency. Who got hurt the worst? Consistently, it was middle-class savers, people who had worked for decades accumulating money in bank accounts or pension funds. They trusted the system because it had been trustworthy. Their wealth existed on paper. When the paper lost its power, everything they had built dissolved. A professor could not afford dinner. In contrast, people who held tangible assets, physical goods in the real world, came through most intact.
This is because they're the ones with the skill sets. So when you're dealing with the farmers market, they're more used to barter and trade because that's actually the origin of a farmers market, was the barter and exchange. It wasn't necessarily built on money until after it became a societal thing. But locally, the local farmers would farm different things and they would trade amongst each other. And then other communal people could go to that little trade center, that little square where all the farmers got together and did their trade, and then introduce the other things like the tools and stuff that the farmers and stuff would need. So they would trade back and forth clothing, fuel, food, or other foods, but your different things that they're dependent upon besides just the food, the alcohol, the medicines, things like that they didn't produce. This is when you go out with your talents and you share them with others, you come back with other talents in return. Argentina's barter clubs prove that hand tools and information are renewable wealth. A hammer doesn't run out of value. Your skills and tools are the only things a government can never tax or take away. This is why you are taxed in the administrative government systems. The money is their product and your use is an implied third-person contract, even if you have your own tools and skill sets. You're dependent upon that monetary system when you don't need to be.
Farmers, tradespeople with skills, and small merchants holding inventory had wealth stored in things. History shows currency crises are a recurring event, not anomalies appearing in all types of nations. The question is whether you will be paying attention when the signals appear. If this channel helps you see historical patterns with clarity, subscribe. It might change everything. Survivors shared liquidity in the right form. They held assets that others needed immediately. They could find a trading partner in minutes, the farmer with grain, the chemist with aspirin. Second, they had layered positions. They held multiple layers of food, practical goods, and portable items. The garden survives when the vault is empty. Third, they made decisions before the crisis was obvious. Decisions made after a collapse was visible were often too late to matter. The household that stored tradable goods early had options that others did not. Survivors were historically informed. They understood paper claims are only as strong as belief. Physical goods with utility are valuable regardless of what happens to belief. The gap between a claim and the thing itself is where every crisis was born. Back to Heinrich in 1923. He represents many middle-class professionals whose stories were recorded. Those with physical assets sold them for stable currency. Those with only savings were impoverished. In late 1923, a new currency backed by land stopped the hyperinflation almost overnight. Trust can revive a currency, but its loss can destroy everything built in its name. These 5 items are obvious in retrospect and invisible in advance. Most did not act on history. This video is historical analysis. It is not financial advice. Every situation. Imagine it is October 4th, 1913.
Absolutely not.
Imagine it is.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. This is not financial advice. We're just discussing a possible remedy for the financial difficulties that we're having today, and that the financial difficulties may or may not be over. They could get worse. They could fall out completely. What are you going to do then? What's in your wallet? What are you going to have when the economy collapses? Are you going to prepare that now through an education? History is screaming a warning, folks. Paper claims are a lie. It's the physical goods that are the truth. Layer your supplies like the eggs in one basket. You don't keep all your eggs in one basket. Layer your supplies, sharpen your skills, and get ahead of the mathematics of a collapse before the music stops, because this circus ain't over until the clown dies. So let's get on to the next one. Like I mentioned before, we've recently reviewed this guy, Frugal Off Grid. So be sure to go check him out. I'll drop his link real quick. And greetings, AV Designs. How are you, brother? The link's down there for anybody who wants to come up and discuss as we're building the Short Bus Podcast TV. Yeah, let's get into it. And real quick here, a reminder, hit that like, share, and subscribe button, folks. There is a PayPal link down below for anybody who would care to share some love. Always appreciated. Trying to get the StreamYard up and full running for a full panel to do these debates on the Short Bus Podcast TV. So let's check it out. We've got this guy, Frugal Off Grid again, and he's going to tell us here's the solution to off-grid finance. But you won't listen. Just like I said, you know, people are dependent upon this monetary system. They don't want to fall off of it. They don't want to get rid of it. They don't want to learn how to do their own barter exchange and imbue their own talents naturally to create things that they can appreciate. Whereas this monetary system in a usufruct is depreciating our value so much that our value is collapsed long before any economy will ever collapse. That's why you're dependent upon it. So let's take a listen to him as he talks about here's the solution to off-grid finance, but you won't listen. Go back to my previous video that I did here not too long ago. What if I told you, I already told you, and you didn't listen?
I'm going to give you the financial solution to most off-grid problems, and odds are really great that you're not going to listen. And the reason for that is because it requires you to change your life. Every day I get comments that I'm just lucky because I have a YouTube channel, or, you know, people imagine you just have to make more money. I often get comments that People imagine they just need to make more money, or they blame my success on the fact that I got lucky to have YouTube, or it boils down to simply that I got land when it was cheap, more or less creating excuses as to why I succeeded and potentially they may not.
And that's what I call deflection, or not deflection, projection. And this is why I use the little lippy clown as part of the segments for the Short Bus Podcast TV, because we really are talking about the psychology of people in this economic war that is truly a spiritual war. Are you going to overcome your gluttony, greed, laziness, and get out there and do what you were meant to do as a creature of this, quote, God that everybody wants to believe in? And I'll help everybody hopefully understand my aspect on it. Again, I am not a Christian, but I've read through the scriptures and everything, as well as various other religions throughout the world, Hinduism, Buddhism, and all that, Taoism. The simple aspect is that we're all supposed to do unto each other as we would have others do unto us. And the priority fact that this, quote, God, I use the term source of life. That's what I use when I think of the term God that somebody else created, and this noun thing. It's, to me, God isn't supposed to be personified, again, according to those scriptures that I learned and other religions, that it's an omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient thing. And therefore, I prefer to call it source of life, which in Hebrew is Ruach HaKodesh. So let's get into it again, get on with this, and understand this is a spiritual warfare. And you need to just get up off your butt and get into the manual aspect of that spiritual.
Many people think YouTube solved my financial problems, but YouTube did not solve my financial problems. YouTube is simply a tool. If you look at
one of them valuable tools we just discussed in the previous video about barter items, like I said, I mentioned these devices, and the tool that this device is, it's the biggest library on earth, and it's right in your fingertips. Start using it, get its education properties, and understand its value. It has so much greater value as an information and knowledge tool than any kind of drama panels will ever bring.
YouTube influencers, they rely mostly on AdSense. If you look at their website, if they have one at all, they often don't have a mailing list. They don't offer any kind of products, resources, or tools. And therefore, in that case, they really are just relying on YouTube, which is not a good idea. That's a fragile situation to be in. And it's better to have redundancy. And
that's why I want to create the reviews of these kind of videos, a redundant review of these kind of videos, as well as a redundant interview of people that are actually doing this kind of stuff, whether that be weekly, bi-monthly, or monthly, I don't know yet. And then the weekly podcasts. Along with that, like I've mentioned, we have product line in design to bring out babbleheads with little voice recorders that you can either record your own saying, or you can get a quote from somebody else, one of your favorite panelists, or do something for your own show with ordering your own babblehead as a marketing tool for your show. All kinds of ideas that we've got coming up, and we want the viewer participation in it. We want to bring the viewer into the panel. We want to bring the viewer into their nature, both on panel and in the real world. We want to see the viewer active both on the panels and in the real world. We want to show these exchanges and everybody's outcomes, so we can merge into those outcomes and find out what's collectively the best outcome. Repetitive, redundant. Get redundant in that, and we too will be able to go back to that, quote, diesel on our own. We don't need the big corporate. We don't need to be dependent upon it. That's the financial aspect, the dependency.
it's better to own your sources of revenue rather than basically be an employee, which if you only produce content for YouTube, you're basically an employee of YouTube. That means you have to perform every day. You have to constantly make videos. You have to try to chase trends and make really exciting videos. And that changes the trajectory when you could just be a lot more authentic, tell the truth, not focus on views. Views
Shit.
don't really matter that much.
I didn't realize I was muted. So kind of reiterating what this guy said, you got to have the tools. And if this YouTube is going to be one of those tools, you have to go by its parameters and not just allow YouTube to make money off you on AdSense and limit it and be frugal about it, because that's kind of inefficient on your part. If you want to do this for money, you have to go gung-ho and do everything you can to optimize that money mechanism if you're going to be dependent upon that. But again, this guy it's just an extra above and beyond, because he started doing this on a reserve of money and just doing it knowing he's still going to do it no matter what. That's like me on this YouTube. I'm going to do this no matter what. I'm going to keep pumping the information out no matter what. Whether the Short Bus Podcast TV is successful or not, I'm going to keep doing this stuff and pumping this information out, because I think this is where people are turning, is the off-grid lifestyle. And that's the true mechanism of getting back to our nature, not necessarily learning how to live off-grid without finances. Just drop the finance part and understand how powerful you are in your information and knowledge if you start building that now. That's your foundation of value and wealth.
When you own your content. So the most common misconception is, well, if I just earn more money, money solves all your problems. All you have to do is earn more money. But that's not necessarily the case. If I was going to give you the absolute pinnacle, most valuable thing that I did to get ahead, to get a footing for my homestead, it was to build my own home. I'm reducing the largest expenses in my life. So by building my own home, I no longer have mortgage. By building my vehicles and buying used older vehicles, I own them outright. I don't have to make a car payment. Those two are absolutely enormous. Most Americans have those payments, and that's what's preventing them from saving money and investing and getting ahead.
So by becoming frugal, instead of being dependent on having such nice, luxurious vehicles and such convenience in your life, get rid of some of those luxuries and convenience, downgrade, and learn how to live more within a simpler means and make your life simpler. Imagine if you downgrade in that automobile in the house and you no longer have to pay those mortgages, leases, car payments, insurances. Imagine that's the majority of your life in these modern economic money mechanics. And they know it. Where you have a necessity for life, the things that you necessitate are what they are monetizing the most, because they have the most value. So they do everything they can in every little nook and corner, every little shadow of tax and insurance loopholes, registrations, code enforcements. All this shit is just a monetized mechanism to take what your value is, no matter where you derive it. And you're depending upon this monetary system for that evaluation. I'm urging you to look in yourself and learn what you can do.
Of course, there's also food, so offsetting those costs. Utilities can be offset. Of course, there's a big investment up front for solar and things like that. But by removing the largest expenses in your life and living within your means, you can start to carve out wealth, even if you work a minimum wage job. Just a really quick example to make that easy to grasp. Imagine a guy working at McDonald's. Maybe he's making $10 an hour. And there's another guy making $50 an hour. The guy that makes $50 an hour has a $3,000 mortgage, a $700 truck payment. He likes to have real nice clothes and they go out to eat often. At the end of the day, there's no money left. In fact, he's even extending his credit just to get by every month. While you've got a guy who's making $10 an hour, living in a cheap apartment, not buying anything flashy, rarely eats out at all, and is able to save 25% of his income. Do you realize that 25% of $10 an hour is a whole lot more than 0% of $50?
Yeah, and that's relative to one of the situations we're in right now with this constructive eviction we're going through. Court, it's in the Supreme Court at this time yet, Iowa Supreme Court, but it cost us everything we had to move, and now we're limited to the money that we had, and our expenses are a little bit more. So I've had to go through and find ways to cut the budget. We cut almost $400 off the budget, which is very reasonable and it's going to help us out tremendously. we're actually going to be able to start putting something back again. Very little, but we'll still be able to start putting something back again. And this is living within your means. We have to cut certain things out. We'll do it. We're not dead yet. We're living within our means. And in that means, a lot of that budget is going to be taken over yet at the harvest end of the season, where we're going to be having lettuce and tomatoes and peppers and hopefully potatoes and cucumbers and all kinds of stuff to help us with our grocery bill as well. So everything is preemptive and preparing and living thriftily within one's means.
An hour. So the part that I got mocked for the most, you know, oh, that's some crappy land. That land is less desirable. That land is worthless. That land was one of the best decisions I ever made. I paid $1,800 for 2.5 acres that I own outright for the rest of my life. Yes, in reality, there are property taxes, just like everyone else has property tax. Happy to pay it. I then built my home. I paid about...
That's one of those aspects we'll go over here one of these days when it comes to those property taxes. What are they evaluated for? And how is the tax assessment in error? How do we correct that assessment? And what are the effects? Pay attention, folks. We'll be discussing that one in the future because that's very relative to everybody living off grid for their own means and not for commercial purposes. Like we discussed before, though, this guy has his products and services that he makes from that soil that he's building up and then sells. So there is some kind of commercial taxation allowed for that. But what is it? For those that are doing this just simply to live off grid and be left the fuck alone, yeah, there's questions that need to be asked and records that need to be corrected. And the effects will be certainly surprising for many, I'm sure.
$13,000 to build this thing. I paid pretty well all cash. I used a couple, you know, I had a couple credit cards, you know, a couple $1,000 at a time, something like that. But I would just pay them off every month or two. You know, I paid cash for my vehicles, no car payments, no mortgage, no rent, no land payments, just a small property tax bill. That has freed up an enormous chunk of money. Even though I don't make an enormous amount of money, I'm able to save a much larger portion than most people. That's absolutely wholeheartedly the very best way for anyone in the world to get ahead, is to live within your means and spend less than you make and hopefully save 25, maybe 50% of it. Okay, so what's the current mortgage right now? Maybe $2,000 a month? That's a really fair estimate. Now let's say that's you. You're paying $2,000 a month for your mortgage. And now you don't have to pay that mortgage anymore. What could you do with $24,000 a year?
That's a substantial amount of money, don't you think, guys? Particularly considering this guy started with $6,000 in his pocket. Here it is 5-6 years later. Go check him out. Frugal Off Grid. Link is down in the chat.
What if you saved half of it? Suddenly, emergencies aren't such a threat. It sure felt good the other day when I had to get a vet out here, which was not cheap. And it wasn't really a problem. I'd rather just save the money, but I had it sitting there. And I was able to help my mare so that she could get rid of that placenta so that she wouldn't die. It was definitely worth the investment to save my mare and her baby full. And having the money set aside made it much less stressful. In fact, my whole life, if a starter went out, if a tire popped, it was a catastrophe. And now it's not. I can break down an hour away from the homestead and get towed, even though it's going to be astronomically expensive. At least I have a buffer. In fact, I've got such a good buffer that I didn't even have to tap into my emergency fund. You know, suddenly property tax doesn't even matter.
So without the alcohol and cigarettes and stuff, by letting that stuff go, this guy is telling you how his life, and of course, his, you know, he's got a solitary personality. He likes his solitude. He said that. And I'm the same type of guy, but all of us have this desire to have a partner in our life as well. So even there, you know, that calmness, and again, that it comes from appreciating the things that you can do yourself and feeling within your own nature, your own abilities, and how powerful that is.
Why would, you know, now I understand some people have $5,000 property tax, but that's not my fault. I'm not the one that didn't do the research. You know, I did the research, and currently my tax is like $12 a year. Now that I have a permitted cabin and whatever, that'll go up a little bit.
So yeah, $12 a year. That's not too damn bad, you know. $12 a year, man might be willing to do that. It's 2.5 acres. 2.5 acres, $12 a year. That's not so bad. But again, that's still one of those ties. Whereas if you're in a barter trade system and you're not using that money for the sale of your products and stuff that you get off of that land, and you're using a farmer's market barter exchange route, there's a difference. So the questions need to be asked. Again, is the assessment proper?
I can swing it. It'll be okay. It's a wonderful trade-off. Don't pay $2,000 a month. Do pay $12 a year. That's easy math. You still need to have income. Off-grid living doesn't remove that. It'd be a very slim chance to just create your own little world where you don't rely on anybody at all. But you can have.
Correct. And that's why the barter exchange system is so imperative, because nobody can do it all yourself. Again, the reason I mentioned the partner, we need partners, not just our own partner within our life to help us through that solitude, but neighbors. Love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the imperative of that, is we all have to have those neighbors that are doing unto others as we would have them do unto ourselves, by sharing in that barter and exchange system what we don't have for what they don't have.
More independence, more autonomy. You can create your income, reduce your costs, that's the trick. And then you can live happily ever after. The trick is, if you don't have massive expenses, all of a sudden you don't need to have massive income. And in fact, many people would be better off to work for themselves and make $30,000 a year than making $100,000 a year and trying to keep up with the Joneses with a flashy house, car payments, flashy clothes, the neatest shoes, the newest phone, expensive glasses. Look, guys.
Yeah, that 100,000 a year is going to cost you 30,000, and you still ain't kept up with the Joneses, because the Joneses are making 150,000.
These are like, I think they're like $5 a pop. They're just safety glasses. I like them. And I've been ordering this exact same pair. I got another pair hanging up over there. They're just $5. I need safety glasses sometimes. I need sunglasses sometimes. And I really don't care if you like my sunglasses. That lifestyle affords the ability to put some wealth aside. And I want
getting rid of the luxury and convenience and the brand names, you know, the logo stuff, the logos.
I'll point something else out is, now this is a bench-made pocket knife, and I think this might be about $200, which is not cheap for a pocket knife. And so frugal doesn't mean cheap. Sometimes you buy a $200 pocket knife that'll last the rest of your life, rather than a $45 pocket knife every year or two, especially when you really need one. Boots is
exactly. So you have to be prepared and know what you're doing first. Don't just go out and buy a $45 knife because it's cheap and you think it'll last. Know what you're doing first. Do your research. This device right here is an awesome thing for that. You can do your research and find out what knives are best, what ones are going to last a lifetime, things like that.
Another example. I've got boots that are probably a couple $100 a pop, but they're going to last me the rest of my life pretty well. You can have them resold. They'll last forever. So sometimes it makes sense to spend a little bit of money when it's going to save you money in the long term. Life is about leverage and compounding. And so if you can do something once today that yields pay for the rest of your life, and you do that over and over, it's going to be real slow at first, but it's going to have that snowball effect. And before you know it.
Yeah, and that's that redundancy. Once you, just like riding a bike, the more redundant you are about practicing riding the bike, the better you're going to get at it. So it becomes redundant and repetitive even more. You get better at it, so you get quicker at it. So it becomes more redundant. You ride it even more because you appreciate it. Same thing with any other talent.
You've got money coming in. This is the part that blows my mind. I literally laid out the map just now. This is how to do it. This is the solution. And most people will say, yeah, and move on. Yeah, but, and it's because what would make this video viral and real exciting is if I just said, here's five tricks to get ahead with your homestead, and I gave you a bunch of crap.
Bingo. So we're talking about the reality of it, and this is the stuff people don't want to listen to. They don't want to listen to the reality. They don't want to listen to the reality that they have to get off their ass and learn so they can do it themselves. Most people don't want to do this stuff. They've already given up the responsibility for that comfort and convenience to somebody else to have them do it. But where does the true liability rest when you're the one paying that $2,000 mortgage and you can't pass anything on to your children because of it?
That doesn't really work, shortcuts. And then the reason that that would perform so well is people would listen to that and say, oh, I
Except maybe that same debt that keeps growing and growing.
don't have to do anything. I can just be financially free if I use these shortcuts. But shortcuts don't work. That's why they're called shortcuts. You know, you build a shortcut cabin and it becomes a shortcut. When the wind blows, now you got to build it again. So most people would ignore this advice.
And that's what most people like. They like shortcuts. They like the ability of being able to go around something and not having to do with it, or take responsibility, liability, culpability. Again, putting that blame on somebody else who's responsible for them and their actions. Somehow conveniently professing that they're free while they carry that someone's ID in their wallet, saying that ID, yeah, that's who your daddy is. So paying tribute to that false patriarch and not paying attention to their true nature and the patriarch's visual, observable world here as we have it to our benefit. We're destroying it. We're not using it to our benefit. We're using it to the comfort and convenience of an economic money mechanism.
Nice. And it's because they want immediate gratification, like the new, what's the whole new thing, like buy now, pay later? That's wild. I think it's called like Klarma and the others. That's wild. I want it now. And most people just see a flashier life with nicer things and more money. And
just like an addict, I want it now. Now. That's an addict. Gotta have it now.
Here's the paradox, is if you truly, really, really do want to get ahead, the best way is to not have the flashy car and not have the flashy house and wear $5 hoodies. These are literally like $5 or $7 a pop. I don't need a $50 hoodie. Are you kidding me? I would never. I just don't see the point. Now I might pay $100 for a really good rain jacket because there's no such thing as bad weather, only bad clothes. You need wool socks, but you don't need to have a merino wool hoodie. There's things that make sense to invest in and others that don't. If you want to have a phenomenal off-grid life or just build more sustainability or security for yourself in your life, whatever it is, stop focusing on making more income and focus on spending less. Focus on.
And I guess that's one of the aspects I forgot to mention earlier, you know, when we talk about fabrics and tarps and duct tape in regards to the barter items, you know, these cheap clothes is what's going to help set you up for that. Getting out of the habit of buying the high dollar name brand merchandise and being able to put up with the unnamed merchandise or the generics, which are comparable quality in most cases, is a much better alternative. And particularly if you've got your own skills, you can personalize those items as well. Again, like I said, there's so many things that we can do and should be doing to get back to our true nature and our true talents. Get rid of all the flashy lights and sirens and bells and whistles that attract us to that circus.
Reducing your costs. If you can get an apartment for half the cost, that's a phenomenal move. If you can get a vehicle that costs half as much money, that's a phenomenal move. If all your buddies got the biggest Duramax truck and you show up to work in a little smart car and they laugh at you, who cares? Because at the end of the day, there will be a day where you're the one that's laughing to the bank because you own your vehicle in your house. Quit trying to keep up with the Joneses. And once you create more structure and lower pressure, everything else seems to pan out.
And you won't need those vices, the alcohol, cigarettes, tobacco, caffeine, things like that. That calmness will come on its own. I urge you to get out and start getting involved in the nature, whether it be gardening or going down to the local pond or river to do a little bit of fishing or bird watching or anything like that. Get out there and start observing the world around us in nature and get back in touch with your true nature. Because this societal thing is just a big distraction of what we can actually be and do. And it's much more to our true nature to be that true steward. So think about this stuff. And remember, folks, hit the like, share, and subscribe button. There is a PayPal link there for anybody who wants to share some love. All is appreciated. I want to thank you for joining us. And remember, folks, it's a short ride on the short bus.